All of the domestic ungulates we are going to talk about in this class are ruminants. So I want to briefly discuss and go over actually what is a ruminant. But during the process of photosynthesis, plants, they take energy from the sun and fix carbon in this very special molecule called cellulose. And this particular molecule, it's very stable. Plants use it to build their cell walls, use essentially their skeleton, and it's very stable. Once this molecule is formed, it's extremely difficult to break it apart, hydrolyze it. We humans do not have the ability to digest cellulose. As a matter of fact, no mammal has the ability to digest cellulose. And now you should say, hey, wait a minute, what about all those livestock animals eating grass and browse and everything else? Isn't there cellulose in there? And how come the animals are eating it if they don't get anything out of it? Well, it's not the mammals digesting the cellulose. It's actually the microorganisms in the rumen that is actually producing the cellulase, the enzyme that breaks down cellulose. And so ruminants, they have this very large storage chamber called a rumen. And I know a lot of people talk about the four stomachs of a ruminant, and they usually are talking about F-O-U-R. A ruminant only has one true stomach, but it does have a forestomach, F-O-R-E. It has this structure before the stomach. It has a forestomach, a rumen. And this rumen is a multi-chambered vat. It contains a lot of bacteria. And it's the bacteria that break down the cellulose that is consumed by the animal. And we will see the benefit the animal gets from this relationship, and we'll see the benefit the microorganisms get from this relationship, which we call mutualism. And so the domestic ungulates that are ruminants in Alaska include reindeer, there's the cattle, there's bison, which, as you recall from the previous lecture, are not really domesticated, but we're going to include them in the course as well. There's yaks, and there's elk. And there's also sheep and goats. They are ruminants as well. So what happens in the rumen? A ruminant will go out, it'll graze, it'll take in this plant material, it'll chew it up a little bit, but it'll essentially go into the rumen unchewed and undigested. When it's in the rumen, the cellulose, it becomes covered by bacteria, protozoan, and fungi, which produce and secrete cellulase, which begins to break down the cellulose. And it's an anaerobic fermentation and anaerobic digestion. And so it's fairly inefficient. These microbes have to strip the oxygen from the cellulose molecule, which ends up producing these end products, volatile fatty acids. And so the microorganisms, they utilize the glucose from the cellulose for their metabolism as their energy source, but the ruminant doesn't use the glucose released in the rumen. The ruminants use the volatile fatty acids as an energy source. And there's three major volatile fatty acids. There's propionic acid, acetic acid, and butyric. The propionic acid is absorbed by the rumen. It goes through the bloodstream to the liver, and the liver, through a process, gluconeogenesis, produces glucose, and that's how the animal gets the energy source. The microorganisms, they break down the cellulose as an energy source. They use that energy source to replicate themselves. Any protein that is ingested is broken down into the amino acids, and the amino acids are further broken down into ammonia. And then the microbes use the glucose, the energy from the cellulose, and the ammonia to manufacture their own bodies and replicate themselves. These microorganisms, in turn, work themselves through the rumen, the reticulum, the omasum, and into the true stomach, and are digested by the ruminant. The ruminant isn't digesting the plant material, it's digesting the microbes that have essentially fed upon the plant material. But a lot of the plant material that's ingested, the cellulose is really tough stuff. And it's difficult for the bacteria to work its way in and really start to break down the cellulose because it's all self-contained. And so what a ruminant does, it ruminates. It regurgitates a bolus. Some people call it cud. They regurgitate this bolus. The ruminant, whatever it is, it rechews this, breaks it down further into smaller particle size, increases the surface area for these microbes to further break down the cellulose. And once it reaches a small enough size, usually a millimeter in size, it passes on through the rumen, reticulum, omasum, into the true stomach where it's digested. So ruminants can survive on a very low protein diet because ruminants don't require protein to survive. Because remember, the microbes are creating amino acids from ammonia. So ruminants can just consume any nitrogen source, and it's converted into a protein, amino acids that are used by the animal. Also, ruminants are very good at recycling any nitrogen in the body. A lot of the nitrogen, we excrete a lot of waste nitrogen in our urine, but ruminants, they have an ability to gather up this urea before it's secreted in the urine, and it's recycled through the saliva, and it's put back into the system. So ruminants are very good at conserving protein, nitrogen, and so they can get by on a very limited, low protein diet. And so the rumen is an amazing organ. It actually greatly increases the quality of life on this planet because we can take all this forage, all this cellulose that we can get no food value at all, and we can feed it to our domestic livestock, and it's converted into milk and meat and fiber, things that we can use.